I am True Review, and I'm here to ask you a question. Is a man not entitled to bang his own daughter? No, says the man in tutorial, that's just f***ing wrong. No, says the man in the Vatican, she belongs to God. Or more likely, she belongs to him as another concubine. No, says the rest of the men in your court, she belongs to everyone else. Well, I rejected those answers. Instead, I chose something different. I chose the impossible. I chose Crusader Kings 3! A game where the YouTuber would not fear the censor, where the depraved would not be bound by petty morality, or in this case, YouTube's community guidelines, where the great would not be constrained by the small. And, with the sweat of your own brow, your own daughter can become your wife as well. But before anyone decides to report me to the authorities, let me explain what I mean for the rest of the video. CK3, as it's commonly known as, is a grand strategy game that was released in 2020, making it possibly the only good thing to have come out that year. For anyone who has never played a CK game before, or even a grand strategy game by Paradox Interactive, then what happens essentially is that you pick a time period to start in, either pick a real historical figure or create one of your own, hit the start button, and then it's a race to the bottom from there in who can be the most horrible human being alive. Providing that you don't die immediately, that is. The freedom and possibilities that are now open to you are boundless, as is the potential ways of losing the game. The aim of each campaign is to... well, that's the thing really, there isn't one. The aim of each campaign isn't actually to win, unless that's what you want to do, and despite this game being classed as a grand strategy title, in truth, it isn't. For those who watched my RimWorld video, then this game's purpose mirrors that game more closely, in that what it really is a story generator. It's not about the big goals or achievements that you acquire that matters here. The real treasures are the people we murdered along the way. Pick from one of several starting time periods, all ranging from early Middle Ages to late. You can then either pick from a set number of minor landholders to play as, or don't. Instead, you click this button down here, let the game map load up, and now you can play as anyone alive at that time, including knights, kings, emperors, sultans, or even the Pope if you so wish. Or alternatively, you can still play as the head of those factions, but as a custom-made character instead, where you can set your desired stats and rule the Byzantine Empire as a malnourished female toddler who happens to be a genius, and at the same time, a complete bastard. The general idea of each campaign is essentially to not have your bloodline die out, which really requires you do two things. One, you need to be a landholder, which can mean anything from being a petty king's bitch to being the host of several bitches. So long as you own land and have a coat of arms, then you're still in the game. But the second point is to establish a family tree. Eventually, at some point, the character you're playing as is going to die, and they'll usually die in the most redundant way possible. In one of my playthroughs, I played as Earl Stephen the Useless of Ulster. True to his name, one day, while doing absolutely nothing, he became ill. He sought out his physician's advice, who advised on a high-risk, high-reward treatment. His treatment for the common cold involved amputating one of Stephen's legs, along with his nads for some reason. Stephen went into that operating theatre a sick man. He walked out of it on one leg and unable to sire children from that point on. Oh, and he still had the cold. To which the court physician lost his head. The next physician didn't do too much better and took his other leg and disfigured his face. Since Stephen had no children and was now unable to have children, he died soon after from his illness, and that was the campaign over. Sometimes your characters will either suck or have bad luck, and there's not much you can do about that in these cases, unfortunately. So upon starting a new game and setting your affairs in order, it's time to sort out some affairs of an entirely, different nature. Namely, banging everything that isn't nailed to the floor. And I'm not referring to DIY. You'll first want to find yourself a wife or husband, since any children you have with them will be your primary heirs, but marriage in this game isn't about love. It's about land. You want to marry someone who's both young and either the ruler of or the heir to as much land as possible, because any children you have with this person will mean that they will be set to inherit these lands as well as yours. So if something unfortunate were to happen to the current owner of said lands once you've got some heirs, then that would mean that this land will pass to your children instead. Unless of course they passed your newlywed wife first, in which case you can expedite this process along by simply throwing your wife in jail for no apparent reason other than why not. Your lords and nobles will hate you for it, but hail to the king, baby. And then there are the extramarital affairs, and honestly, 9 times out of 10, you won't need to actively go out searching for this, as you'll randomly get event chains pop up about your character trying to get it on with the ladies of the court. Your wife will hate you for it, but she knows better than anyone that marriage in this game is about land, not love. And since child mortality is a big deal here too, there's a good chance that your children with your wife won't make it. So it's an entirely reasonable strategy to cheat on your wife. Once you've got enough legitimate children, or you've cheated on your wife enough times, you'll have your very own dynasty to do with as you please. Personally, I like sending them out into the world to rise through the ranks of other nations. And to make it easy for me to know if my bloodline is thriving, and thanks to this game allowing you to name your children as you please, I tend to name all of my children after curries, as it's a heartwarming feeling to see that the Kormas have become some of the biggest landowners in Wales, while the tikka masalas are climbing the political ladder in Spain. But wait, I hear you say, what about if you're only having daughters? Not to worry, there's a solution for that too. See, if you change the inheritance law, then women can also inherit lands, but if not, then there's a way around this. There are many options available to you, but honestly, most of them are wrong. You could marry your daughter off to the most powerful noble in your kingdom and form an alliance with him as a result, sure, but what happens when your daughter dies? That's right, your alliance goes with her and you lose any claims to his lands. So what is the correct but possibly morally terrible solution? Well, it requires that you take a leaf out of the ancient Egyptians book and turn that family tree of yours into a family pole. The first thing you do is marry your daughter off to said noble. Then you murder said noble, widowing your daughter, who has now just inherited a lot of land because the last noble didn't have any heirs. Then you marry your daughter, meaning that any children you have with her will not only inherit your lands, but also hers. And finally, to make sure that these lands never leave your hands ever again, you're going to need to establish first dibs on the hands of any children you now sire. Not only is this the best strategy of expanding how much land you control, but it is also the only way of making sure that those patches of land forever remain in your hands. That is until you gain so much land that it's going to go over your total allowed number of holdings, in which case you need to start dishing out these lands to your vassals, at which point all those years of inbreeding and murder are ultimately rendered redundant. There's a big emphasis in this game on diplomacy and politics, as well as the everyday running of a kingdom, and don't get me wrong, that is very important to sort out. There's not much you can do if you don't have an income, so constructing buildings within the lands you own will at first take forever. But once you've got some money coming in, you can spend that on more buildings that will generate you more money that you can then spend on more buildings for more money, and eventually you'll have more money to build more buildings. Once you've gotten to that part, however, you'll also be able to summon large armies. What do you do with said armies? Well, if you're paying attention to what your inner court can do, by the way, promote people to the relevant position, you can make your daughter wife your spy master if you so wish. But anyway, providing you've appointed one, you'll also have a bishop in your court. Bishops in this game are amazing. They're only one of 2 types of characters that can move diagonally. Bishops can be used for one of 3 things. Spreading the word of your chosen but 100% real god, either through peaceful prayer to those who already believe, or by burning everyone who refuses to convert if they don't. But most importantly, you can send a bishop to any region in the game. Upon arrival in said region, your bishop will hit up the local library, go through the local hereditary records, and see if you have a possible claim to that area. In the inevitable event that you don't, well, let's just say that the word no isn't found in the medieval dictionary, so I wouldn't worry about that being the case. You can fabricate, legitimately bring to light as many claims to as many places as you'd like, but once you're ready and you think you can handle it, you can declare war on the faction whose lands rightfully belong to you as of a few moments ago. At the start of each war, you have to make clear your claims. The actual war itself is won via a point system in which you gain points for defeating armies and capturing lands and settlements. Be the first to reach 100 points or thereabouts, and you can force the other side into accepting your conditions. Battles themselves are done via an auto-resolve, stat-based system, and this is based on several factors including numbers, quality of troops, and who moved into which territory first, since you gain a defense buff if the enemy moved into the same region as you. Although random events during the war could change the course of it, so keep that possibility in mind. In fact, most of what happens in this game is entirely random. You see, there's something you should know about this game. There's a lot to do in it, but at the same time, you don't actually play it. Rather, what will happen is you set the stage by assigning people to positions of power, make important decisions on policies, buildings, going to war, marriage, etc. but then you sit back and let time pass. And as time passes, random shits will happen. Shit that will be out of your control. Your character is randomly sleeping with one of your courtiers without you telling him to, and now he's contracted lover's pox. This hasn't killed him thankfully, but it has made him a carrier, and now, suspiciously, all the women at court are contracting the same symptoms. Not to worry though, since you have a male heir to carry on your dynasty. Well, he would carry on the dynasty were he not gay. You could get invited to a feast by one of your vassals, only to become stressed by the fact that one of your relatives doesn't understand a penis joke that someone made, and now you have to run the risk of explaining it to them and making them look stupid, which will hurt your reputation with them, or keeping quiet, thus making them look stupid, which will hurt your reputation with them. Anything can happen at any time, and it's usually a balancing act for you. The obvious options might increase your stress, and too much stress can either make you adopt negative traits, or go insane, or can outright kill you. So what's the best way of dealing with stress, I hear you ask? It's simple. Like with all things in life, all of your problems can be solved by getting shit-faced. Finding that hiding 3 lovers from your estranged wife to be getting to you? Then crack open a cold one with the boys. In fact, most of your stress can be relieved in this game by throwing a party and getting wasted, or visiting a brothel for some RNR and STDs. The only problem with constant partying is that alcoholism is real and can quickly turn you into a drunk. In addition, parties run the risk of increasing your stress even further, depending on what random events happen during the course of the piss-up. So if you really are throwing a party with the intention of relieving stress, and someone in your entourage doesn't understand the penis joke, then you better well damn explain it to them. Ultimately, this game is about putting everything in place to ensure that your dynasty stands for 1,000 years. And then immediately proceed to watch it all unravel within a few months due to some stupid shit that you couldn't have foreseen coming. And I love it. A game of conquest might be fun, but most games have already covered that one to death. The Crusader Kings series does something completely different, in that it's not the outcome that you're striving for, although you can also do that if you so desire, but rather it's the story that you make along the way. Each time you load up a new game, the events that unfold will be completely different, and no 2 games are ever the same. At present, this game is still relatively new and receives regular updates too. With that in mind, this game runs very, very smoothly on modern computers. There is also a growing modding community here too, so if the amount of atrocities that are present in the base game aren't enough, then more can be found on the workshop. However, my biggest criticism of this game is actually aimed at Paradox Interactive themselves, regarding the way they treat their DLCs, because if you thought EA was bad, then think again. Each of Paradox's titles have come with their own army of DLCs, and most of them are full retail price. This means that if you want the complete experience, you could be spending several £100 or dollars just for the experience. Because of this, I have only covered the base game in this video. There are still many features that I loved in CK2 that weren't present in this game, but even considering what the base game doesn't have here, it's still worth playing. Everything else is optional. In conclusion, damn, that moment when you realise you've already covered the conclusion in the previous paragraph. But given what I've said on this game so far, then it shouldn't come as a surprise that this is a recommendation from me if this looks like something you'd enjoy. Do not go into this game expecting to win. Spending all of that time trying to conquer the entire map can actually be quite boring. The real entertainment can be found from the get-go in all of the random, ridiculous, and morally suspect events that take place at court. Crusader Kings 3 is a grand strategy game that's hardly about crusades, not really about kings, and the less said about the strategy part the better. But there isn't really a gaming category out there where you play as someone who sleeps with their daughter and then dies, but I guess that even games like this need to be placed in some sort of category.